In 1955, Burroughs had noted that his novels Junk, Queer, and the Yage letters, written in collaboration with Allen Ginsberg, reconstructed his past. Naked Lunch, on the other hand, with its abrupt transitions and contradictions, tended to accomplish the opposite. In September 1957, he felt feedback from Ginsberg was disappointing, as Ginsberg argued for a linear continuity, considering any attempt at chronological arrangement extremely ill-advised. While this certainly clarified matters for Burroughs, he still rejected the advice bluntly. What he was attempting to write went completely against tradition, and that was the intent. He wasn't interested in the structure or confines of traditional fiction regarding how it presented time, stories, or identities. He was interested in a form that reproduced his very personal experiences of both Tangier and his drug-induced sensitivity to the strange unfolding of histories, cultures, and encounters in the place. And this would result in a style that could blend dream and reality seamlessly, a fusion of past and future, fact and fantasy. Now, after 3 months of frantic writing and self-analysis through the winter of 1957 in Tangier, he felt ready for the next step. The new style had come with a new identity, which demanded a new locale and a break with the past. Ready to be sent to publishers, he deemed Paris, France as the only place where a book such as his could be published, and Maurice Gerodias of Olympia Press was appointed as perhaps the only person to consider doing it. Unfortunately, Gerodias had already rejected the manuscript. However, an excerpt that appeared in magazines in the U.S. would change this. The Black Mountain Review and the Chicago Review, thanks to Allen Ginsberg, ran sections of the book. Irving Rosenthal, a graduate student recently made editor of the Chicago Review, was excited by the Beat Generation writers and the San Francisco poets and typically ran their work. Now, according to Burroughs, Rosenthal said he would publish everything he would send. Burroughs, of course, was overjoyed. This was all the encouragement he needed to begin his deluge of material to Rosenthal. Rosenthal then wrote to Allen Ginsberg saying of Burroughs, "He is the most uneven best writer I ever read. It's unbelievable." To Burroughs, Rosenthal was the only editor who really understood what he was doing. When the autumn 1958 issue of the Chicago Review appeared that October, it included writings that contained the words shit, ass, and fuck, which caused quite a backlash. Now, soon after, an October 25th column entitled Filthy Writing on the Midway by Chicago Daily News columnist Jack Mabley called the Chicago Review issue one of the foulest collections of printed filth he'd ever seen publicly circulated. Now, according to Mabley, the obscene words were like, quote, kids chalking a four-letter verb on the Oak Street underpass, and wrote that the university, quote, should take a long, hard look at what is being circulated under its sponsorship. Now, student editors of the review were supposed to have editorial autonomy. However, Mabley's outrage put university authorities on the defensive. Even old grads were calling in to complain. Furthermore, the fundraisers and public relations people said the review's excesses were undermining their efforts. Well, Rosenthal and 6 members of the Chicago Review staff resigned in protest. Soon thereafter, Rosenthal and poetry editor Paul Carroll started their own magazine, running the suppressed material in the first issue in March 1959. Jack Kerouac got word that they were looking for a title, so he sent a telegram suggesting Big Table, which was derived from a note he had left himself on his writing desk. Get a bigger table. A Big Table it became, with the first issue incorporating 10 episodes from Naked Lunch, Kerouac's Old Angel Midnight, and 3 poems by Gregory Corso. The issue's subtitle was The Complete Contents of the Suppressed Winter 1959 Chicago Review. The Postmaster General at the time, Arthur Summerfield, was known to be a hardliner on pornography. Well, that March, several hundred copies of Big Table were held up by the Chicago Post Office. This, however, did not deter Rosenthal and Carroll, who had the entire printing of 10,000 copies shipped to New York and San Francisco. In fact, the post office impounding spawned national notability for the magazine, leading to the issue being sold out. Then, after a judicial ruling stating that the magazine was not to be stopped from being mailed, Big Table continued to publish 5 issues in all of which were mailed. Now, Burroughs' delight turned sour, however, when he heard the magazine had been declared obscene by the U.S. Post Office. This, he knew, would make publication of Naked Lunch in the United States impossible. However, as a result of the controversy, Naked Lunch came into the public eye and found its way to the eyes of Maurice Girodias, who, as we mentioned, had rejected it the previous year. Now, Maurice Girodias' specialty was publishing suppressed books, so he got in touch with Burroughs, inviting him to dinner. He found Burroughs impossible to grasp, however, being a completely unprecedented type, a man who looked so intensely respectable and puritanical, a man who wrote such obscene prose. He was difficult to talk to because he was so silent and ghostly. He looked frail, terminal. Nevertheless, Burroughs' talent was undeniable, and Girodias wrote him on June 6th, asking him to be allowed to get another look at Naked Lunch. From that point on, things happened very fast. Now, Girodias decided to publish the book, drawing up a contract giving Burroughs an $800 advance and giving himself 1/3 of the English language rights. Now, Ginsberg wrote from New York warning Burroughs to, quote, "make sure he doesn't own half of you, as if you were a prize fighter." Well, Girodias invited Burroughs to his restaurant and says to him, "This is a complicated business full of angles. I know them. You don't. Let me handle it. You'll have to trust me." Now, Burroughs knew that under his timid and confused manner, Maurice Girodias was a very smart man, and that he also might get lucky with the book. You see, Burroughs had been witness to the struggles Kerouac had to go through for 5 years trying to get On the Road published, and therefore figured this was the best deal around. Now, in a decision Burroughs would come to regret, he agreed to let Girodias avoid U.S. taxes by transferring the book royalties to Switzerland, where they would be funneled through his agent, Odetta Hummel. In July 1959, Sinclair Bales, acting as Girodias' go-between, told Burroughs that he had exactly 10 days to prepare the manuscript for the printer. And the deadline pressure helped to weld the book into one organic whole, with Bales and Brian Geeson helping with the editing as section after section was carried by Bales from the Beat Hotel to the Olympia offices a few blocks away. And the sections of the novel were sent to the printer in random order, but when the galleys came back, this random order seemed to mostly work, and they were kept that way, except for a few changes. And Burroughs corrected the proofs and designed the jacket, and so by the end of July, the book was rolling off the presses for a run of 10,000 copies, twice the usual Olympia printing. And quite rapidly, there was a small flurry of acquisition. Limes Verlag offered $400 for the German rights. Mondadori took it for Italy. Burroughs was told, however, that they were buying it to keep it off the market. And Barney Rosette of Grove Press bought the American rights for $3,000. In France, Gallimard bought it in a translation by Girodias' brother, Eric Kahane. However, through them, the book appeared with a barre noire, a black stripe, meaning that under prevailing laws, it could not be placed in bookstore windows. It took 3 long years for the book to hit stores in the U.S., but when it was published on November 20th, 1962, its reputation and controversy made it a solid splash, nearly selling 8,000 copies in less than a month, and more than 14,000 copies in the first 4 months. William S. Burroughs was a voice to be reckoned with, an extreme one at that.